I am very grateful to have this wonderful opportunity to be with all of you again in Sri Sri Radha Gopinath Temple. This is the longest duration of time I've been away from this temple since the day it began in 1986. I'm so grateful to be with you again. Thank you. A few days ago, somebody asked me that we read in this book, The Journey Home, that you are sitting on a rock in the middle of the Ganges for 1 month, just drinking Ganges water, eating a carrot. And recently we saw you sitting on a main network television show. Said, what is it like from going from a rock to a television show? Sound system has not improved since 1986. Hari Hari. Hari Hari. Even if we had a 10 crore sound system, it's still run by the brahmacharis. Hare Krishna. Does this one work?
Now there's sound. Yes, Maharaj.
Some value for Hari Hari. So I was asked this question, because you may have forgotten, it was a long time ago. What was it like that once you were sitting on a rock in the middle of the Ganges fasting, and now we see you sitting on major network American television? So I thought about it for about 2 seconds, and then revealed my realization that in reality, all it is just sitting on 2 different rocks in 2 different locations of the river of life. And then I meditated on Srila Prabhupada. At one time he was sitting in his rooms in Sri Radha Damodar temple, in the Seva Kunja, where Krishna performs his divine Rasa Lila. Immersed in his bhajan, translating Srimad Bhagavatam, writing purports, right a few feet away from the samadhi of Sri Rupa Goswami. And a little later, he was on the ship Jaladuta in the middle of an ocean. And he was traveling around the world, sometimes speaking to heads of state, to audiences of tens and thousands. But for Srila Prabhupada, whatever the situation, he was simply serving his Gurudev. He was simply trying to please Krishna through his pure loving service. And there is this story in New York City when devotees worked really hard to have the biggest program in the history of Srila Prabhupada's mission at that time. Instead of a little tiny storefront, they actually rented out a sizable hall and advertised. And only a few people came. Beyond the few devotees that were there, the audience hardly filled 1 row out of the many, many, many seats. And Srila Prabhupada spoke with the same enthusiasm, the same empowerment as he would if there was tens and thousands of people there. And devotees actually afterward apologized that it was such a failure. It was supposed to be such a big program and no one came. And Srila Prabhupada said, "Oh, no one? You did not see? Narada Muni was there." And then he started listing all the other great saints and devas that were there. Nobody saw. Now, whether Srila Prabhupada was actually seeing them physically with his eyes, or whether he was relaying to us that we're always being observed by Krishna, by our gurus, by the whole parampara, in whatever we do. whether we're sitting on a rock, whether we're preaching to millions of people. Sam Siddhir Haritoshanam. Krishna's pleased by the sincerity of our service attitude, not by the physical situation. And wherever that service attitude is, Srila Prabhupada explained, that place is transformed by a devotee's desire into Sri Vrindavan Dham. Vrindavan is the holiest place in all of Brahma's creation. Its location, where Lord Krishna, Sri Radharani are performing their Nitya Lila, their eternal pastimes, is there, just about 90 miles southeast of New Delhi. But it's not this material world, it's the spiritual world. The Yamuna, Govardhan, the Gopas, the Gopis. It is said that Krishna never takes a step out of Vrindavan. Whether we can see that Vrindavan is dependent on our sincere service attitude. Premanjana churita bhakti vilochanena. When one's eyes are anointed with the salve of prema, spiritual love, then we could see Vrindavan. Otherwise we see the outer appearance. You see all the sewage and all the garbage that is strewn around Vrindavan today. That's not Vrindavan. That's just stuff on the outer surface. Vrindavan is the ever pure, transcendental spiritual world that is manifested within this world. But wherever devotees are sincerely serving with unselfish love, without egoism, that place is Vrindavan. Krishna manifests within the consciousness of that devotee, the spiritual world. And Srila Prabhupada, in one beautiful purport, speaking on this subject, he gives the example of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. We know he was a great acharya who was a grihasta. His beloved wife, Bhagavati, a Paramhamsa lady. The two of them had 10 children. He worked a government job, and we have seen photos of him in some of his occupational wardrobes, which are quite amazing. Sometimes we see him just wearing a simple dhoti with tilak, holding his japa beads. Another time we see him dressed as a royal judge or magistrate in the British courts. Bhaktivinoda, in his writings, he tells us that when he comes to his home and sees his family together serving Shri Radha and Krishna, he sees He's not just feeling or believing, he's seeing. His house is transformed into Goloka Vrindavan. It factually is Goloka Vrindavan. And that is the beauty of bhakti. There is no material considerations that can impede us from the complete union with the Lord through devotion. All that is required is our sincerity. At the time of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, there was tremendous emphasis on ritual, on caste, on perfect execution of different rites, of scholarship. And the Lord, He excelled better than anybody in his manifestation of doing all those things. He was a Brahmin, he was a sannyasi, he was the most learned scholar. As far as his pronunciation of Sanskrit and mantras, he was Nimai Pandit. He was a scholar among scholars. What it would take 12 years for a top-level Sanskrit teacher to teach a student, Lord Chaitanya could accomplish the same thing in a couple weeks. But yet, the Lord explained that it is not dependent on these material qualifications or disqualifications. Our spiritual advancement is simply dependent on pleasing Krishna. And Krishna is pleased by the sincerity of our hearts. In a few days, some of us will be going to South India for the yatra. Please raise your hand and say Hari Bol if you are coming to the yatra. There in Sri Rangam is the famous story of that Brahmin who was practically illiterate. He would sit in a courtyard where all the great Pandit scholars would assemble every day to recite scriptures and discuss. And he would sit alone to recite the Bhagavad Gita every day. But because his recitation was so inadequate as far as proper pronunciation or even proper understanding, nobody took him seriously. Sometimes he was ridiculed, sometimes he was looked down upon. So why would he always come there? Why didn't he just stay home and do it? Where the whole world didn't know, wouldn't understand how illiterate he really was. But he would come there every day and recite all the 700 verses of the Bhagavad Gita. While the greatest scholars on earth were there reciting Vedas. Lord Chaitanya came to that place. Vedaishta sarveraham eva vedyo vedanta krit veda vedeva chaham. Krishna tells us in the Gita that Krishna is the knower of the Vedas. He is the compiler of Vedanta. By all the Vedas, Krishna is to be known. That is the goal, to know Krishna. Ragad Vaishava Muktaistu Vishayan Indriyaicharan Atma Vishavidhe Atma Prasadam Arigachati. By following the rules, the regulations, by following the principles that the Vedas give us, the whole purpose is to please Krishna. And when we please Krishna, we receive His mercy, His kripa. And that mercy is the only thing that can lift us beyond the sufferings of birth and death. That mercy alone can give us the realization of who we really are. And how to love God. Daivi he shugunamayi mama maya duratyaya mame vamye prapadyante maya metadharantite. Material existence, very, very difficult to overcome. These three modes of nature, sattvaguna, rajaguna, tamaguna, how they're interacting with each other, how they're activated by time, and how they affect the mind and the senses, and how they incriminate the ego in so many selfish activities. It's insurmountable. For a small child to climb to the top of Mount Everest and then climb down the other side and then go through the entire Himalayan range and then come down and walk to the Bay of Bengal and then swim across to Los Angeles, California, through all the connecting oceans. That's millions of times easier than trying to disentangle oneself from the ropes of the three modes of material nature. Egoism and greed and selfishness, and passion. But Krishna says, one who takes shelter of me. Taking shelter means to receive mercy, can easily cross beyond it. Mayadhyakshena prakriti suyate sacharacharam. Because Krishna is the controller of material existence. So Krishna does not consider our material qualifications or disqualifications. He considers our sincerity. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came into that courtyard, and all the great scholars who were perfectly reciting in rhyme and rhythm and pronunciation all of the different Vedas, he did not acknowledge them. He went to that one simple, illiterate Brahmin who was struggling through the Gita. It probably took him a really long time every day, most of the day, to struggle through. Lord Chaitanya asked him, what he was doing. He said, actually, I do not know Sanskrit properly. I don't know how to read or recite. But my Gurudev gave me the instruction that every day I should sit here and recite the whole Gita. So whatever anybody else may think, I'm trying to please my Guru. Doesn't matter. Krishna explains in the Gita he was reading, one should not be attached to fame or infamy, success or failure, victory or defeat, honor or dishonor, pleasure or pain. Matra sparashas tukonteya sitos na sukha dukada agama payano nityastham statikshasva bharata. That all of these things, happiness, distress, and the other dualities, they are coming and going like the winter and summer seasons. You can't hold on to anything. One should learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. And on the path of bhakti, we don't tolerate by just gritting our teeth and saying, and just, it will pass, I will tolerate. Tolerance means to fix our mind, to fix our words and our actions on a higher principle. Vishaya vartante niraharasya dehina rasavarja marasopyasya param dristva nivartate. We can rise above all these dualities when we experience a higher taste. That higher taste is Krishna's mercy. The love of Krishna. And that grace is accessed by our sincere service attitude. Trinadapi sunichena taror ibasihishnana amanina manadena kirtaniya sadahari. To be humble like a blade of grass, tolerant like a tree, very happy to offer all respect to others, and not to expect respect for oneself. This illiterate person obviously had these qualities as he was stumbling in the most materially uncoordinated way through the Bhagavad Gita. And when he told Lord Chaitanya, I don't know what I'm doing really as far as the reading. Sometimes I understand what I'm reading, sometimes I don't understand what I'm reading. Sometimes I say it right, sometimes I say it wrong. I don't even know the difference. But I'm trying to please my Guru. Lord Chaitanya said, what are you thinking of when you were reading the Gita? Which part? He says, as I'm reading, I only see one thing. I see this picture in my mind. There is Krishna, who is Shamsundar. He has a beautiful, dark complexion like a monsoon cloud. The essence of all beauty. And he's standing on his chariot as the driver of his devotee, Arjuna. The Supreme Master, the Lord of all of existence, is taking the role of the servant of his own devotee. When I see this beautiful form of Krishna, I'm in ecstasy. Lord Chaitanya, he gave that answer when Lord Chaitanya said, if you don't understand the Gita, why are you crying? Why are there tears welling and flowing from your eyes? Why are your hair standing on end and why are you trembling? And he gave this answer. I'm just seeing Krishna. Imagine, even in its imperfect pronunciation, Krishna was fully, intimately manifesting within his heart. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu embraced that Brahman and said, "You are the true knower of the Bhagavad Gita." His sincerity. And through this story, the Lord wanted to show us that whoever we are, wherever we are, however we are, if ever we are, whatever your condition is, there's no impediment to attaining the perfection of life if we're humble and sincere. And part of that sincerity is to be genuinely grateful for the opportunity to serve in any situation. And just to try to please Srila Prabhupada and the great souls. Little Dhruva Maharaj, he was utterly devastated by his stepmother when she insulted him with words that were like flaming arrows that pierced through his soft and tender heart. And he was only 5 years old. And his father would not acknowledge him. He felt not only humiliated, he was made to feel totally worthless, useless. And when his father didn't say anything, he felt betrayed and abandoned by the one person in his life that he trusted the most. When you're a 5-year-old boy and you go through that, it's traumatic. He looked up to his father. His father sheltered him. And when he was in the most desperate condition of his whole life, his father ignored him. So he ran to his mother. She said, "Dhruva, there's nothing I can do. Your father really does not favor me. But your stepmother said that the only way you could sit on the throne of your father is if you worship the Supreme Lord, and by doing so, die, and then take another birth in her womb. Then only will your father acknowledge you." What she said is correct. You should worship the Supreme Lord. So little Dhruva left home with such determination to find the Supreme Lord. He went into the jungle. He was sincere. No impediment if we're sincere. How is a 5-year-old child going to survive in a jungle? And it's not like the jungles today. Today, almost every dangerous species is endangered. In those days, there was no endangered species. There was millions of tigers and lions and panthers and wild elephants and lots of snakes, scorpions, mosquitoes. spiders, poisonous plants. It's the jungle. And a little 5-year-old boy all alone, walking around even in the dark of night. But he had one thing. He had genuine sincerity. He wanted to find Krishna, Vishnu. So Krishna sent Narada Muni, his guru, who just happened to appear in that lonely, dark jungle where there was not another single human being. Because he was sincere. And Narada Muni first tested him. He said, Dhruva, don't worry about these things. Just go home, play, it will pass. Dhruva said, I want Vishnu. I want to see Krishna. He had a material motivation, but he was turning to Krishna for it. And Narada Muni told him, go to Vrindavan, to the forest of Madhuban, the bank of Yamuna. And there, chant the holy names of the Lord constantly. Worship the beautiful form of the Lord. No impediment. Narada Muni wanted him to worship a deity. He didn't tell Dhruva, take the express train to Jaipur and go to the Pandey Murtiwala and place an order for a deity. Yes, if you do that, it's very nice too. But if you want to do deity worship, Narada Muni said, don't worry. All you have to do is just the mud on the bank of Yamuna. There's plenty mud. There's unlimited mud. Just make a deity there, made out of mud. And this is how you can worship him. And if you worship that little mud deity with love and devotion, Krishna will manifest himself and accept our offerings. No material impediments. And he did. And ultimately, Vishnu appeared to him and offered him any benediction. You want a kingdom greater than your father or grandfather? I will give you. Dhruva said, I don't want those things. Now that I see you, all of my desires are fulfilled. I want nothing else. Dhruva expressed his only desire was to be the servant of the servant of the servant.